Here we go. I'm going to perform an audiobook reading. This is for my community service unit at my university, which I am not going to dox to you, but it beats reading books to old people. I just feel like you guys would appreciate it more, and like maybe you won't be racist towards me. Anyway, I'm trusting y'all on this one. Here we go. Diapsalmata. Ad se ipsum. What is a poet? An unhappy man who harbors deep anguish in his heart, but whose lips are so formed that when the sighs and cries pour out over them, they sound like beautiful music? He is like the unhappy ones who are slowly tormented by a slow fire in the oxen of Phalaris. Their cries could not reach the tyrant's ear to horrify him. To him, they sounded like beautiful music. And the people flock around the poet and say to him, "Sing again soon." That is, may new sufferings torture your soul, and may your lips continue to be formed as before. For the cry would only frighten us, but the music is delightful. And the critics step in. They say, "It is true," or "so it must be according to the rules of aesthetics." Now, it is understood a critic is like a poet to a hair, only he has not the anguish in his heart nor the music on his lips. See, therefore, I would rather be a swineherd at Amagabro and be misunderstood by the pigs than be a poet and be misunderstood by men. I prefer to talk to children, for of them one may hope that they may become rational beings. But for those who have become like so, my goodness. I simply can't be bothered. I don't want to ride. It is too violent a movement. I don't want to walk. It is too strenuous. I don't want to lie down, for either I should lie down, and I don't want to do that, or I should get up again, and I don't want to do that either. To summarize, I don't want to do anything. In addition to my numerous circle of acquaintances, I have another intimate confidant. My spirit, in the midst of my joy, in the midst of my labor, he waves to me, calls me aside, even if I seem to be physically present. My spirit is the most faithful mistress that I have ever known. No wonder then that I should love again. That is why Aladdin is so invigorating, because this play has the ingenious, childlike audacity of the vainest desires. How many are there in our time who truly dare to wish, dare to desire, dare to appeal to nature, either with the tiny, tiny wish of a well-behaved child or with the rage of a lost individual? How many are those who, in the sense of what is so much talked about in our time, those human beings who are created in the image of God, who have the true voice of command? Or do we not all stand there like Noureddin, bowing and scraping, scared to ask for too much and too little? Or is not every magnificent desire gradually reduced to a morbid reflection on the self, from desire to desiring itself, as we are brought up and trained to do? Alas, the door of happiness does not go inwards so that by storming against it you can push it open, but it goes outwards, and therefore there's nothing that you can do. I have the courage to doubt. I believe in everything. I have the courage to fight. I believe in everything, but I have no courage to recognize anything, no courage to possess, to own anything. Most people complain that the world is so prosaic, that the world does not happen in life as in the novel, where opportunity is always so favorable. I complain that it is not in life as it is in the novel, where one has hard-hearted fathers and goblins and trolls to fight, enchanted princesses to free, What are all such enemies combined against the pale, bloodless, tenacious, nocturnal figures with whom I struggle and to whom I give life and existence? What is to come? What will the future bring? I do not know. I have no idea. When a spider plunges from a fixed point into its consequences, it always sees an empty space in front of it in which it cannot find a foothold, however much it scuttles. So it is with me. I always see an empty space in front of me. What drives me forward is a consequence that lies behind me. The life is backward and horrible, not to be endured. It is, however, the most marvellous time of the first period of falling in love, when at every gathering, at every glance, you bring home something new to rejoice over. My view of life is utterly meaningless. I suppose that an evil spirit has put a pair of spectacles on my nose, one lens of which disturbs according to an enormous scale, the other which diminishes according to the same scale. Of all ridiculous things, it seems to me to be the most ridiculous to be in a hurry in the world, to be a man who is quick to his meals and quick to his work. When, therefore, I see a fly at the decisive moment settle on the nose of such a businessman, or he is splashed by a carriage which passes him in even greater haste, or when the drawbridge goes up, or when a roof tile falls down and kills him, then I laugh from the bottom of my heart. And who could help laughing? What do they accomplish, these busy labourers? Does it not happen to them as it did to the housewife who, in her confusion, saved the fire tongs out of the fire? What else did they save out of the great fire of life? I like the patience to live it all. I can't see the grass grow, but if I can't, I don't want to look at it at all. My views are the fleeting observations of a travelling scholastic who rushes through life in the greatest haste. It is said that our Lord feeds his stomach before the eyes. I cannot feel that. My eyes are full and bored with everything, and yet I hunger. Life has become a better drink to me, and yet it must be drunk like a draught, slowly counting each drop. No one returns from the dead. No one has gone into the world without weeping. No one asks you when you want to enter. No one asks when you want to leave. Time passes. Life is a stream, say the people, etc. I can feel it. Time stands still, and so do I. All the plants I hatch fly right back in my face. And when I want to spit, I spit in my own face. When I get up in the morning, I go straight to bed again. I am at my best in the evening, the moment I switch off the light and pull the duvet over my eyes. Once more I get up, look around the room with indescribable satisfaction, and then good night, under the duvet again. You should be generous, not only to others, but also to yourself. I know I am. I study myself. When I am tired of it, I smoke a cigar to pass the time and think, God knows what our Lord really means by me, what he wants to bring out of me. Let others complain that the time is evil. I complain that it is vile, for it is without passion. The thoughts of men are as thin and frail as lace, and they themselves are as poor as lace girls. The thoughts of their heart are too basic to be sinful. It might be considered a sin for a worm to have such thoughts, but not for a man made in the image of God. Their lusts are leisurely and idle, their passions sleepy. They do their duties, these quarrelling souls, but like the Jews, they allow themselves to chip the coin a little. They think that if our Lord can keep a decent enough book, they can get away with tricking him a little bit. Fie on them. That is why my soul always returns to the Old Testament and to Shakespeare. There you feel that it is men who speak. There you hate, there you love, there you murder your enemy, curse his offspring through all generations. There you sin. Most people are so eager for pleasure that they rust past it. It happens to them as it happened to the dwarf who guarded a kidnapped princess in his castle. One day, he took a midnight nap. Then he woke up an hour later, and she was gone. Quickly he pulls on his 7-mile boots, and with one step he has far past her, far missed her. My soul is so heavy that no thought can carry it, no wind beat can lift it up into the ether. If it moves, it only skims along the ground like the low flight of birds in a thunderstorm. Over my inner being rests an uneasiness and anxiety that looks like an earthquake. How meaningless. How empty and meaningless life is. You bury a man, you follow him to the ground, you throw 3 shovels of earth at him, you drive out in a carriage, you drive home in a carriage, you console yourself that a long life lies before you. How long exactly is 7 times 10 years? Why don't you do it all at once? Why don't you stay out there and go down into the grave with him and cast lots to see who will have the misfortune to be the last living person to throw the last 3 shovels of earth on the last dead person? Wretched fate! In vain you make up your furrowed face like an old harlot. In vain you make noise with the jesters. You bore me, it is all the same. Et idem peridem. No change, just a rehash. Calm, sleep and death, you promise me nothing, and you keep everything. These familiar violin strokes, these 2 familiar violin strokes here at this moment, in the middle of the street, have I lost my senses? Is it my ear that has ceased to hear out of love for Mozart music? Is it a reward from the gods to bestow upon me, the unhappy man who sits like a praying mantis at the door of the temple, an ear that tells what it hears? Only these 2 violin strokes. For now, I hear nothing more. As in that immortal overture they break out of the deep choral tunes, so here they unfold themselves out of the noise and din of the street with all the surprise of a revelation. It must be near here, for now I hear the light dancing tones. It is to you, unhappy pair of artists, that I owe this joy. One of them was about 17 years old, wearing a green calico coat with large buttons on the legs. The coat was much too big for him. He held his violin close under his chin. His cap was pressed down over his eyes. His hand was hidden by a glove without fingers, the red and blue fingers that are shaking with the cold. The other was older and wore a chenille. Both were blind. A little girl, who presumably led them, stood in front and put her hands under her scarf. We gradually gathered a few listeners of these tones: a postman with his parcel of letters, a little boy, a servant girl, a couple of jokers. The stately carriages rolled noisily past. The labour carts drowned out these tones, which appeared from time to time. Unhappy pair of artists, do you know that these notes conceal all of the glories of the world within them? It happened in a theatre that the scenery caught fire. Clowns came to inform the audience of this fire. They thought that it was a joke, and they started clapping. The clown said, "There's a fire," and then they still cheered. They cheered still more. And thus I think the world will perish under the general cheering of these clever people who think that it is all a joke. The real pleasure lies not in what one enjoys, but in the performance. If I had in my service a submissive spirit who, when I demanded a glass of water, would bring me all the world's choicest wines deliciously mixed in a goblet, I would give him his farewell until he learnt that pleasure does not lie in what I enjoy, but in getting my will. After all, I am not the master of my life. I am a thread to be spun into the treadmill of life. Well, if I can't spin, I can still cut the thread. I seem destined to go through all sorts of moods, to have all experiences in all directions. Every moment I lie like a child, learning to swim in the middle of the sea. I scream. I learnt this from the Greeks, from whom one can learn the purely human. For though I have a harness around my waist, I cannot see the pole that is to hold me up. It is a dreadful way of learning to swim. What philosophers say about reality is often as disappointing as what you read in a sign in Mas Candace's shop. Laundry, folding here. If you wanted to bring your clothes in to have them folded, you would have been fooled, for the sign is merely for sale. For me, nothing is more dangerous than remembering. Once I've remembered a relationship, the relationship itself has ceased. It is said that separation helps to refresh love. That is quite true, but it refreshes in a purely poetic way. To live in remembrance is the most perfect life imaginable. Remembrance is more satisfying than all reality, and has a security that no reality possesses. A remembered relationship has already entered into eternity, and it has no temporal interest anymore. There is, however, a great deal of naivety in believing that it will help to shout and scream in the world, as if it would change your fate. You take it as it is offered, and refrain from all nonsense. When I went to a restaurant in my youth, I said to the waiter, "Yes, give me a good cut, a very good cut off the back, not too fat." The steward probably hardly heard my shout, much less than that he should heed it, much less that my voice should be able to penetrate into the kitchen, move the carver, and even if all of this happened, there was probably not a single good cut in the whole bar. And now I shall never rant anymore. The social endeavour and all the wonderful sympathies that accompany it are spreading more and more. In Leipzig, a committee has been formed which, out of the pity for the sad fate of old horses, has decided to eat them in their old age. And I have only one friend, and that is Echo. And why is he my friend? Because I love my grief, and it does not take it away from me. I have only one confidant, the silence of the night. And why is it my confidant? Because it is silent. Has it happened to my meniscus? According to legend, who lost the ability to laugh in an echo cave, but regained it on Delos at the side of a shapeless block, which he interpreted as the image of the goddess Leto. So it happened to me. When I was very young, I forgot how to laugh in a cave, and when I grew older, when I opened my eyes and looked at reality, I began to laugh, and I have not ceased to do so since that time. And I saw that it was the meaning of life to get a living, and school to become a lawyer, that it was rich, and the desire of love to get a wealthy girl, that it was in the bliss of friendship to help each other in financial embarrassments, that it was wisdom to go along with common sense, that it was enthusiasm to make a speech, that it was cordiality to make goodbye after a midday meal, that it was godliness to go and see the old folks once a year. I saw all of this, and I laughed. And what is it that binds me? What was the chain that bound the Fenris wolf? It was made of the noise of a cat's legs when it walks on the ground, of a woman's beard, of the roots of the rocks, of the grass of the bear, of the breath of the fishes, and of the spittle of the birds. And also, and I am bound in a chain formed by such dark imaginings, by anxious dreams, by troubled thoughts, by fearful forebodings, by unexplained visions. This chain is a very supple, soft as silk, yielding to the strongest strain, and yet it cannot be torn in pieces. It is strange enough, it is always the same thing that engages one through all the ages of life, and one always gets just as far, or rather, one turns back. When I was 15 years old, I wrote in the School of Learning with much eloquence on the proofs of the existence of God and the immortality of the soul, on the concept of faith, on the meaning of miracles. For the examen artium that I wrote in a dissertation on the immortality of the soul, for which I was awarded praeseteris. Later, I won the prize for a dissertation on this such subject. Who would have thought that after such a solid and very promising beginning, in my 25th year, I would have come to a point where I cannot produce a single proof of the immortality of the soul? I particularly remember from my school days that treatise of mine on the soul's immortality, which was highly praised and read out by the teacher, both on account of the excellence of the contents and the language itself. Alas, 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 this treatise I have long cast away. What misfortune in my doubting soul would perhaps have been imprisoned, as well as by the language as by the contents, in this sin. It is then my advice to parents, guardians, and teachers to instruct the children entrusted to them to save the Danish treatises that they wrote at the age of 15. To give this advice is the only good thing that I can do for the good of the human race. I may have come to the realization of the truth, but certainly not of salvation. I mean, what shall I do? Work in the world, answer the people? Should I then communicate my sorrow to the world, make another work to prove how sad and wretched everything is? Perhaps discover a new field in the sadness of the humanities that had hitherto gone unnoticed. I could then reap the rare reward of becoming famous, like that man who discovered the spots in Jupiter. I mean, I, however, prefer to remain silent. My life is like an eternal night. When I die, I can say with Achilles, Du bist vollbracht nach Wache meines Designs. My life is utterly meaningless. When I consider its various ages, my life is like the word Schnur in the encyclopedia, which firstly means the string, secondly a son's wife. All that was lacking was that the word Schnur should mean thirdly a camel, and fourthly a duster. I'm just like the Lüneburger pig. My thinking is a passion. I am excellent at digging up truffles for others, but I have no pleasure in them myself. I take the problems on my nose, but I can do no more about them than throw back my head. I mean, I'm just like the Lüneburger pig. My thinking is a passion. I am excellent at digging up truffles for others, but I have no pleasure in them myself. I take the problems on my nose, but I can do no more about them than throw back my head. In vain I resist. My foot slips. My life, however, becomes a poet's existence. Can anything more unhappy be imagined? It is predetermined. I am destined. Fate laughs at me when it suddenly shows me how everything I do against it becomes a moment in such an existence. I can depict hopefully so vividly that any hopeful individually I can depict hope so vividly that any hopeful individual will recognize my portrayal. I can depict hope so vividly that any hopeful individual will recognize my portrayal, and yet it is a falsehood who I can depict hope so vividly that any hopeful individual will recognize my portrayal, and yet it is a falsehood for I can depict hope so vividly that any hopeful individual will recognize my portrayal, and yet it is a falsehood, for while I depict it, I remember my memories. And how dreadful is boredom. Just so dreadfully boring. I know of no stronger expression, no truer, for only the equal is recognized by the equal. If only there were a higher expression, a stronger one, then there would still be movement. I lie stretched out, inactive. The only thing I see is emptiness. The only thing I live on is emptiness. The only thing I move in is emptiness. I don't even suffer from pain. The vulture was always pecking at Prometheus's liver. Poison was always dripping down on Loki. That still was an interruption, however monotonous. Pain itself has lost its glory for me. Whether I was offered all the glories of the world or the agonies of the world, they affect me equally. I would not be attracted nor repulsed either way, neither to approach nor to flee. I die death. And what could distract me? Yes, if I saw a belief that withstood every trial, an enthusiasm that bore everything, a faith that moved mountains, if I realized a thought that connected the infinite and the finite. But the poisonous skepticism of my soul consumes everything. My soul is like the Dead Sea, over which no bird can fly. When it has come halfway, it sinks dully into death and destruction. The disproportion in my build is that my front legs are too small. Like the hare from New Holland, I have very small front legs, but infinitely long hind legs. In general, I sit quite still. If I make a movement, it is a tremendous leap, to the horror of all those to whom I am bound by the closest ties of kinship and friendship. Why was I not born in Niboldo? Why did I not die as a little child? Then my father would have put me in a little coffin, taken me under his arm, carried me out to the grave on a Sunday morning, thrown dirt on me himself, and said half aloud a few words that only he himself could understand. Only the blessed ancients could think of letting the little children cry in Elysium because they had died before their time. I have never been happy, and yet it has always seemed as if joy was in my company, as if the light geniuses of joy were dancing around me, invisible to others, but not for me, whose eyes shone with joy. When I pass by men as happy and joyful as a god, they envy me, my happiness. And I laugh, for I despise men, and I take revenge. I never wished to do any man wrong, but I've always given the impression that every man who came near me had been offended and wronged. When I hear others praised for their faithfulness, their righteousness, I laugh, for I despise men, and I take revenge. My heart has never been hardened against any man, but whenever I have been most moved, I have always given the impression that my heart was closed and alienated from all feeling. When I hear others praise their good hearts and see them loved for their deep, rich feelings, I laugh, for I despise men and take revenge. When I see myself cursed, abhorred, hated for my coldness and heartlessness, then I laugh, and my wrath is satisfied, for if good men could bring me to be really wronged, to really do wrong, well then I would have lost. Wine no longer delights my heart. A little of it makes me sad, a lot of it makes me melancholy. My soul is dull and feeble. In vain I cut the spur of lust in its side. It no longer rises in its slow leap. I have lost all my illusion. In vain I endeavour to give myself to the joy of infinity, for it cannot lift me, or rather I cannot lift myself. Formerly, when it only beckoned, I rose light and healthy and joyful. When I rose slowly through the forest, it was as if I were flying, and now when the horse skims close to crashing, I feel as if I cannot get off the ground. I am alone. I have always been alone, abandoned, not by men, that would not pain me, but by the happy gods of joy who surrounded me in swarms, who everywhere made acquaintances, everywhere showed me an opening. The crowds of youth flocked around me, the elves of joy, and my smile was for them. My soul has lost this openness. If I were to wish for anything, I would not wish for power or wealth, but the passion of possibility, the eye that sees possibility everywhere, ever young, ever burning. And pleasure disappoints, the opportunity does not. And what wine is so frothy, what wine so fragrant, what wine so intoxicating? Where the sun's rays do not reach, the tones do. My room is dark and gloomy, a high wall almost keeps out the light of day. It must be in a neighbouring yard, probably a wandering musician. What kind of instrument is it? A reed flute? What I hear, the minuet of Don Juan. Then carry me away again in rich and strong tones to the girls' dance circle, to the pleasure of the dance. The apothecary pounds his mortar, the maid scrubs her pot, the stableman grooms his horse and beats the bridle on the cobbles. These tones are for me alone. They beckon me alone. Oh, give thanks wherever you are. Give thanks. My soul is so rich, so healthy, so full of joy. My grief is my knife's castle, which like an eagle's nest lies high up on the mountain peak between the clouds, and no one can storm it. From it I do not fly down into reality and seize my prey, but I do not stay there. I bring my prey home, and this prey is a picture that I weave into the wallpaper of my castle. And then I live like a deceased person. Did you know that they couldn't read aloud until very recently? Like, apparently St. Augustine was like a total freak for being able to read silently in his head, and all of these monks were like, this guy's practicing sorcery. But it's, I don't know, like, I just think that there's an interesting relationship between the oral performance and you, the audio listener, that has kind of been forgotten, that I want to try and not necessarily embrace, but re-question with this project. Anyway, I'm going to continue with reading. Oh my god. Cheetos. Søren Kierkegaard. I still don't know what this guy's about, but he may be onto something. Anyway, I'm just the messenger, and I'm going to let him cook. Everything that has been experienced, I plunge into the baptism of oblivion for the eternity of memory. Everything finite and random is forgotten and obliterated. Then I sit like an old grey-hardened man, thoughtful, explaining the pictures in a soft voice, almost whispering, and at my side a child sits and listens, though he remembers and knows everything before I tell him. The sun shines so beautifully and vividly into my room. The window is open in the next, and the street is all quiet. It is Sunday afternoon, and I distinctly hear a lark playing its trills outside a window in one of the neighbouring streets, outside the window where the beautiful girl lives. Far away from the distant street, I hear a man shouting with shrimps. The air is so warm, and yet the whole town is as if extinct. Then I remember my youth and my first love, when I longed. Now I long only for the first longing. What is youth? A dream. What is love? The content of a dream. A wonderful thing has happened to me. I was raptured in the seventh heaven. All the gods were gathered there. By special grace, I was granted the favour of making a wish. If you want youth, send Mercury, or beauty, or power, or long life, or the most beautiful girl, or some other glory that we may have in the chest, then choose. But only one thing. I was perplexed for a moment, and then I addressed the gods thus. Honoured friends, I choose one thing, that I may always have the laughter be on my side. Not one god said a word, but then they all began laughing with me rather than against me. And from this I concluded that my prayer had been answered, that I had found that the gods knew how to express themselves with taste, for it just wouldn't have been appropriate for them to answer seriously. Oh yes, it's all been granted to you. Anyway, this translation of either or is translated from the original Danish with the help of a AI neural network program called DeepL. I just find that such a funny name for like an AI app, mostly because I'm like experiencing some DeepLs myself. Like, I get that I haven't been the best friend to people, but it's been really hard, and there's been a cost of living crisis, and I'm just too hot to be stuck here. But I do deeply apologize, and I'm taking this deeper for us all. Anyway, if you have any questions or any suggestions for what I should read next, pop them in the comments. You can subscribe. I'm going to have Zuri bot on my pod next, perhaps. What else is there to say? Anyway, it is almost 3 a.m. So farewell and good night.